Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums. Thanks for joining us here on your Sunday morning, or maybe it's afternoon or evening where you are. But it's the morning here in the Hudson Valley, and I'm joined by my fellow Hudson Valley Squares mate, Mr. Ryan Skow.
What's up, Pete?
What's happening, man?
Just enjoying the dry weather today.
Yeah, we are just talking about we got a lot of rain here in the Hudson Valley.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, it's this fall. The beginning of the fall season here has been pretty wet, but whatever. It is what it is. I guess we could have it worse. There's other parts of the Northeast that have it definitely worse than we do.
So. Absolutely, that is the truth.
And you know, it kind of figures that we've got some wet, cold, dreary weather because we're going to be talking about a band from a wet, cold, dreary area of the UK. The Doom band, the Doom legends, Electricwizard, who have been around in some shape or form since the late 80s. And they changed the name to Electricwizard at the beginning of the 90s, and we've got 9 studio albums of pretty serious stuff. So we're going to rank them as we like them, from our least favorite to our favorites. As Ryan and I were just talking about before we went on the air, there's a chunk of this catalog that's like hard to kind of differentiate because there's pretty, I guess, consistent degree of really good stuff here. I think you know there's a couple great albums. There's 1 or 2 albums that maybe aren't so great, and everything else in between is just really, really solid. So this was a very tough catalog to rank, and I also have changed my ranking numerous times over the last couple of days. And I was finally like you just said, at some point you just have to stop.
You got to just lock it down and go with what you got.
Yeah. So, well, that being said, Ryan's going to kick us off with his number 9.
All right, so like we just said, when I started doing this, the first 2 were very easy, and the last one was very easy. It was everything in between, which is 6 albums total that are kind of hard to rank. So the last one was easy. It's the only one I don't own, so it's the only one I can't hold up. I listened to it a couple times online when it came out, and it didn't grab me, even though the cover art is very cool. It's the most recent album for 2017, Wizard Bloody Wizard. And the reason I put it as my last one, see, that artwork is really, I like it. The reason I put it as my last one is because, as we'll get into this as we talk about these guys, I've just said, have started in the late 80s, changed their name to Electricwizard, and have been going very consistently ever since. It's a steady drumbeat of albums for a couple of decades now. And they're kind of like the big dogs in the Doom world now. They're definitely one of the biggest Doom bands around, both for the quality of the albums and the consistency. But they also kind of like toe the line between two different parts of the Doom world. And to me, that's, you have all this Doom that's like this monolithic, bleak, nihilistic, dark, like just nasty, filthy, drug-addled, satanic, H.P. Lovecraft, old comic books, weird, like all this cool shit. And then there's the other side, which is, a little more like stoner, mellow, psychedelic, which is also cool, but I tend to veer towards, like, knowing my taste, like the darker and more nasty stuff. And this 2017 album, Wizard Bloody Wizard, is the only album I've heard from them, which to me and maybe some folks feel differently, and of course that's great. It just goes too far in the mellower direction. It's too little of that just monolithic stuff, which they've been doing for a long time. So maybe they wanted to change it up. That's cool, but it's just too much. Like I started listening to it. I'm like, man, this is like kind of like a dirty garage rock album. Which
different. Yeah.
It's definitely nothing wrong with that statement on the face of it. But it's just not what I really want from them, because there are a lot of cool bands that do that. And to be honest, it's just not. I don't think it's just that good of a dirty garage rock album, because it's not really their forte. So, like I said, I've heard it. I listened to it a couple times. I'm like, man, I own their whole discography. Do I really want to have that one missing gap? Yeah, but I could just never justify buying it. Maybe, of course, I might listen to it again after this, which it was the one album I admittedly didn't really go back to when I was going through these albums. I listened to it very briefly for a couple seconds, and I'm like, yeah, this kind of sounds the same. But yeah, that's my number 9 for those reasons. So but again, when you're talking about your favorite bands, and these are a favorite band of mine, you always make exceptions to go back. If you have an album that doesn't hit you, it's like, you know what, I'll go back to that. Maybe I'm going to feel different about it today. So I give my favorite bands like endless latitude in that front, which I'm sure a lot of folks do. You don't say, oh, this album sucks, I never want to hear it again. Sometimes you go back to it in a couple of years, and sometimes you might change your mind on it, better or worse. So I will be revisiting that one, but for right now, it is my least favorite Electricwizard album.
Yeah, more about that in a minute. For me, my bottom 2 were pretty easy to put down there. And I do want to mention, too, one of the things I love about these guys is they love like classic horror films.
Oh yes.
Kind of like, Karen and I were talking about Church of Misery last week and how much they love, they go for the whole serial killer thing as far as all their songs and lyrics and things. And these guys love classic, Hammer horror and Universal horror and 70s Gothic horror and folk horror and all that kind of stuff. And I love that because I'm a big fan, right? So that's like another draw to this band other than all the more obvious reasons, right? So I'm going to go with number, and this may be a little, for some people this might rank a lot higher, but I'm going to go with Let Us Pray from 2002. I love the album cover. I love the design of this. Here's the reason why I have this so low. This is a really highly psychedelic and experimental collection of music, I think. A lot of this stuff on here is very drony and kind of repetitive. It's abrasive and chaotic. Not that I mind that, because some of the albums that we really love from this catalog are very abrasive and chaotic. But I think this album to me is less of like a riffy album than all of their other ones. And the guitar patterns are very repetitive. The rhythms are very repetitive. And granted, there's some good stuff on here. Master of Alchemy and Priestess of Mars are great, but again, they're more like kind of like heavy psych and space rock. Not that that's a bad thing, because I think these guys do that quite well. And I think A Chosen Few and We Are the Undead are really good traditional sounding doom tracks from them. So to me, I don't know, I find this one is really out there, and that's why it's at the bottom of my list. And to me, half the album I really like a lot, and the other half I'm kind of like, I'm on the fence about. So to me, it's one of their weaker ones, but it's still quite good. So it comes in number 9 for me.
That's the final album they did with their original lineup, which had been consistent for a decade.
Yeah.
So I rank that one a lot higher, which we'll get to. But I always, I agree with pretty much everything you said, and I wonder if that was kind of like the dissolution of the lineup, and it's like that album, like it's almost like they're Never Say Die. It's like kind of a, which I also like, but it's admittedly kind of a mess in some ways. They just put it out, fell apart, and because ever since. So we should also say, this band is one of those bands where you have this classic lineup that kind of marches through like the first handful of albums, and then it dissolves, and now it's just been the guitarist Just Osborne, the guitarist and vocalist, which is, if you're going to have one guy left, that's usually the guy that keeps the band consistency or most identifiable. And it's been like a changing lineup ever since, with one exception. So now we're going to get down to albums that, from this point on, every single album. You know what? I'll do the next 2 right here, too. I'll bang them out back to back. This is the albums where every album I think is great. Wizard Bloody Wizard was the only one where I'm kind of on. Every other album in this band's catalog, awesome. From just really awesome to like some of the best doom metal I own. So next one's actually the one before Wizard Bloody Wizard, is 2014, and it was Time to Die. And this album is again, like you said, the classic horror. It doesn't have the garage rock sensibilities yet. So this is Electric Wizard when they're just nasty, heavy, this evil kind of like lurking doom. Although I will say the stuff, which we'll get to, at some point, to me is like almost monolithic in its approach. Once the original lineup, which was Tim Bagshaw on bass and Mark Greenie on drums, once they left, and just brought in other guys, things for the most part got more streamlined. Songs got a little shorter. The bass and guitar tone got a little less monolithic for the most part, but still, like, compared to most doom and most metal and most music, is like, way off the Richter scale, And this album too, it's got some great, like, kind of like old that's the band photo on the back there. So like I was saying, the only other consistent member since they reformed in the early 2000s is Liz Buckingham, who happens to be now Just Osborne's wife. So it's really the two of them. She's on guitars, and then bass and drums have like alternated over the years. So in this case, it was actually, speaking of that, this was the one album where Mark Greenie, the original drummer for the first part of their existence, came back. So it was, and then Just Osborne was on bass. So it was really just a trio of them put out this album. But this isn't really like, this is an album you can kind of like talk about at length. It's just one of those good, solid, fun, consistent. You hear it, you're like, yep, that's what I want. That's just good, solid Electric Wizard doom metal. And put that one there. And then the next one is actually the first album they did after reuniting, which this is one of the ones where now I'm getting kind of torn on where to rank stuff. I originally had this higher, and then I revised it, and I bumped it down lower, so it ended up at number 7. Sorry. That was We Live. Again, cool. It's very dark and gloomy, so we'll take it out of there. A lot of goats, a lot of swirling smoke, stuff like that. Just an awesome album. This has, again, Liz Buckingham on guitars, and they have Justin Greaves on drums. So I'll up my at this point too. So I'm 41, so I started getting into doom metal. I turned 18 in 2000, and as it just happened to turn out, in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, there was a label called Southern Lord, still exists. But when Southern Lord kicked off in the early 2000s, like, they specialized in doom bands. Like, that was the thing. Now they branched out and done other stuff. But at the time, they specialized in doom bands. They did release one thing from Electric Wizard, an EP called Super Coven, which I didn't grab from my shelf for some reason, but it's good. And they released all these other cool doom bands. One of them, which I'll just throw it in here since we're talking about the guy. It also came out on the label, and it's doom and is applicable. It was Justin Greaves on drums, Lee Dorian from Cathedral on vocals, and then some of the guys from Sun O and Con 8 and some of these other, Stephen O'Malley and some of those guys from these other Southern Lord bands. And it was Teeth of Lions, Rule the Divine. So if you want some of the most savage, ridiculous, heavy, just monolithic doom you've ever heard, it's only 3 songs, and the first song is 30 minutes long. That's all you need to know. But if that's the kind of doom you like, yeah, check this album out. I'll just throw it in there real quick. The cover is like a bunch of guys carrying a coffin. It's not expensive. It's not really like a rare cult item, but it's just, if you like Electric Wizard, you haven't heard this album, it's the only thing they ever did, with Justin Greaves on drums. Check this out. Well worth your while. So yeah, We Live, again, it's just an awesome album. When I first heard it, I really was already an Electric Wizard fan. And I'm like, man, the lineup's gone now. It's just Osborne and some other guys at the time. I knew it was that drummer, so I like to look forward to that because he was really good on the other album. But it took me a while to get into this. It was a little more stripped down, a little less like, compared to some of the earlier stuff.
Not as noisy. Yeah,
it's not as noisy. The guitar, like, there's some of the classic albums which we'll get to. One in particular where the guitar tone and the bass together, it's like it'll just like knock. It's like someone's like knocking down your house with an excavator. It's ridiculous. First time I heard it, I'm like, what the fuck am I listening to? This is like, but we'll get to that. But this had a little less of that. But like I said, it's still, compared to most metal, compared to most doom, even, it's still like 10 out of 10 on that scale. So yeah, awesome album. So those are my 8 and 7.
Okay, I'll do the same thing and more on that album a little bit later. So I'll give you my 8 and 7 as well. So I'm going to go with Wizard Bloody Wizard, the most recent one. I absolutely agree with it 100%. You can hear, like, right off the bat, there's a difference here in the style and the production. It's definitely more of like, there's some tracks on here that are kind of like gothic hard rock, like Danzig almost, right? It's cleaner guitar tones. But there's some pretty heavy stuff here. Here the siren scream is pretty heavy and doomy. Wicked Caresses, I think, also is a heavy song, but it's missing that massive fuzz and distortion. I mean, one of the things that this band is so known for, it's almost kind of like they're like the modern day version of like early Blue Cheer, right? They love all that fuzz and distortion. I mean, there's so much gain on the guitars, it's just ridiculous, and there's less of it here. But you got some stuff like Morning of the Magicians is like 11 minutes long. It's kind of plodding. I like this album. I don't love it. I think that the songs are there. I'm not crazy about the way the album sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's missing that traditional Electric Wizard sound. I think if they were to go back and kind of remix this, I wonder if we'd think a little bit differently of it. I don't know, but it's still really solid. Right, it's still really solid, but it's just, I wouldn't recommend anybody go there first when they're discovering this band. Number 7 for me is Black Masses from 2010, 7th album. So here, we were talking before about how when the classic lineup changed and they re-went again with a new lineup, and maybe the harshness of the early days kind of aren't on, like the last album you talked about. The harsh guitar tones maybe aren't quite there. I think they're back for this album. So this one sounds a little bit more like Come My Fanatics and Dope Throne, I think, as far as like the production goes. Mm-hmm. But then there's still some pretty crazy chaotic stuff on here. Like Black Mass, the title track, is great. Venus awesome. And Furs has some serious bottom end. I mean, serious. There's some great bluesy like soloing on here, which really That's one of the interesting things about this band. Like the guitar solos are not traditional doomy guitar solos. They're very kind of psych 70s blues rocky in spots.
Totally. Yeah, he
Which is
definitely
kind of
goes in that
cool.
route.
Really cool. Patterns of Evil is just absolutely enormous. Satire 9 is also a really cool, slow, punishing song. There's lots of fuzz and feedback throughout this album. And I really love A Crypt of Dracula, which is like soundtrack, like an instrumental soundtrack to a horror movie. I think it's a strong album. It has a couple tracks that maybe aren't like high quality, but I think for the most part, everything that's on here is really, really good. So that's my number 8 and 7. Back to you.
All right, so we're gonna pick right up there and go with Black Masses is my number 6 from 2010. So this out, no, first off, I love this art. So it's hard. I don't know if you can see on camera here, but it's got a slipcover, and the title Black Masses is like raised, like embossed on the bottom there. It's kind of hard to see.
Yeah.
Got this black candle, and then if you pull it off, ooh, what do we got inside? Very 60s psychedelic, what's going on there. Yeah, just a cool album. And I'm going to echo everything you said about this album. To me, this definitely has more of the kind of heavy, disgusting sound of the earlier stuff that I feel like We Live was missing. Yeah. So that's the so at this point, let's see. It was Just Osborne on guitar and vocals, Liz Buckingham again, and you had a Taz Danziglo and a Sean Rudder on drums. So those guys weren't in the band long. I couldn't tell you what other bands they were in, but they do serve this album well. So, even if they were only there for a couple of years, this is a great album. Crypt of Drugula, Black Mass, Venus and Furs, Patterns of Evil. Yeah, just a cool album. Again, their love of classic horror, like old kind of like Church of Satan, satanic Black Mass rites, like all that stuff that this band's always been good at. And they don't really, I mean, I don't want to say they do it in like a hokey way, because they do it in a way that's like clearly a love and an homage to like that old 60s and 70s. You have the old pictures of like, Anton LaVey, and his disciples gathered around. More on that later. Old Hammer horror, old Christopher Lee horror, like, old like Vincent Price kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Some of these albums too, they throw a lot of samples in. In fact, when I was getting into them, because they were one of the first doom bands I got into, I was younger, just getting out of my teens. That was some of my introduction to some of that stuff. I'm like, man, what movie is that from? Because I like this music, I like this image, and I looked up some of this stuff based on the samples and some of the references they throw in there, and I'm like, yep, this is awesome. These guys know what's up. So again, this is an album. It's not really no, it's awesome. It's a great album, but within the bulk of their discography, it's just a really solid middle entry. But again, within their overall ranking, within the overall realms of doom metal, I can pull this one out and throw the whole thing on and absolutely love it. My number 5, we're going to go way back to the beginning. So these guys were known as a couple names when they started. Lord of Putrefaction was one. They were around in a few forms since the late 80s. Playing, they never released an album exactly. So it's the first, this is their first album as well.
Yeah, if anybody wants, so Ryan's talking about the stuff before
yes,
became Electric Wizard. So this is a collection of like rarities when they were Lord of Putrefaction and the Grief Eternal and Eternal. So we'll talk about. I'll circle back to this at the end. I just wanted to throw that out there while you were talking.
Well worth. I have that. I didn't pull it out, but yeah, that's well worth getting. It's definitely demo stuff. It's a little raw, a little simpler, but yeah, awesome. If you love the band, if you're a good completist, it's well worth getting. So. Yeah, so at this point, the band was the original trio, Tim Bagshaw on bass, Mark Greening on drums. And Greening's drum playing always kind of interested me, because I don't want to really compare him to Bill Ward, because he didn't really sound a lot like Bill Ward, but a lot like Bill Ward, like the drumming was like a little unorthodox. You hear the earliest Sabbath stuff. He doesn't sound like a lot of like other guys playing like at the time, early 70s.
He shuffles a little bit kind of like Bill.
Yeah, it's like a jazzy shuffle. He definitely does stuff that's not typical of like most guys at that time. And that's definitely true of Mark Greening too. Not so much on this album, but definitely on the ones to follow, because he had a little more space to like explore the music. So this first album, Electric Wizard, self-titled, 1994. This is a case of the band was not yet where they would be, not yet the stuff that would define them and like make them like a household name within the doom, funeral, evil world. But it's just a very solid album. So England already had a good tradition of doom metal. Black fucking Sabbath, but even like in the later 80s, you had bands like Cathedral with Lee Dorian. Then you had bands like My Dying Bride. So England, being a dreary, rainy place, perfectly had a lot of doom, and these guys came right out of that. And so the production here, it's a little more, I'm going to say, compact. The guitar tone is heavy and nasty, but not yet where it would go. So this is more within, I guess I'm going to say this is more, it lines up with like a lot of other doom bands. You know, it's definitely heavy, bottom end, low and nasty, but, you know, they would soon go into even, you know, more ridiculous realms. But it's definitely awesome album. Stone Magnet, Behemoth, Devil's Bride, the song Electric Wizard, Mountains of Mars. Yeah, you could already tell these guys were on like that kind of psychedelic, like that Weird Tales magazine, which is where H.P. Lovecraft got his start, like these early to mid 20th century, like sci-fi horror kind of stories. These guys were definitely already, you know, climbing up that tree. Just an awesome album. And I'll admit, when I got into these guys, because I got into some of the later stuff and I went back to this album, I'm like, it's just kind of like, it's just doom. Like, it's not like doom, you know, it's not like what they would become. It's just a solid doom album. But over the years, I'm like, you know what? It's really fucking good. It's just a good album. It's not the first album I'd recommend from the band because it kind of falls more in line with like other bands, like I said, but that doesn't mean anything bad. It's a really solid album. And in '94, you know, not for nothing, there wasn't a ton of bands playing this kind of stuff. There was a few, but it wasn't like everywhere. So they can't be like, oh, they sound like just another doom band, when really, you know, how much competition did they have? Some, but not tons and tons, not like there is today. So, yep, that's my number 5. And I'll pick number 4 too. My number 4, Pete rated it much lower, but I like it a lot, is their 2002 album, Let Us Pray. When I got this was the first new album I got. So I was, after getting, you know, sometimes when you get into a band, there's a new album that comes right after you get into them. And usually that album kind of ranks high for you because it's the first one you look forward to. So this was that album for me. Everything you said about it, I agree with. It's very psychedelic. It's very drawn out. The riffs it doesn't have as many concrete, like pounding riffs. It's like a lot of like experimental, you know, like just guitar distortion kind of weaving in and out. It's actually got one really cool song called Night of the Shape, which almost reminds me of like Goblin in a little way. It's like very, you know, it's got this piano riff that kind of like floats over the song, and it's not heavy, and it's kind of, the drumming's like just kind of jazzy in the background, but it's very cool and spacey. A very horror movie soundtrack. But like We the Undead, The Outsider, Priestess of Mars, I like this album a lot. Although I do feel, like I said before, this was the end of the original lineup. So if you told me that there was a lot of tensions and a lot of like, you know, communication issues and stuff in the band at that point, I would believe that, because it does sound kind of like, I don't know, it's almost an anomaly in their discography.
Sounds messy almost. Yeah, it's like there's something going on there.
Yeah, I could definitely get that sense too. It's like maybe one of the guys wrote it and they kind of did it at the last minute, because the songs aren't, I want to say, they're not as well composed. It's like they just kind of got together, they jammed out some stuff, which I like, and I like how it came out, but it has that feeling, and I would easily believe that was the case. But yeah, to me, this is a number 4. Still, I love it. I love how it came out. Like I said, it was the first album that I got into, or after I got into them. So nostalgia, again, is kicking high on that factor. You know, I got it in 2002, so I've had a lot of years to kind of just become familiar with it, which can sometimes impact, you know, if you have, you know, even if it's weird, you're like, well, I've been listening to it for so long. I know all the ins and outs of it, which is the case with this album. So, yep, this is my number 4, Let Us Pray, 2002.
Cool. All right. Well, since Ryan pulled the keeler and went 3, I'll do the same. So,
oh, did I do 3? Really?
Yeah.
Oh shit! All right. Well,
he just kept going. I was like, oh, he's going to go all the way to number 1 here.
I haven't had enough coffee yet. Let me rectify that.
All right. So I guess I'll go back to number 6. So, Time to Die from 2014. Love the massive production on this one, man. Holy cow. I mean, you know, maybe, and I agree with you. I think the back cover is just awesome. It just has this look. It takes you back in time, right? Maybe not all the songs are as memorable as on some of their other albums, but the ones that are really good, I mean, really crush. I mean, Lucifer's Slaves is one of my favorite Electric Wizard songs.
Awesome song.
Holy cow, does that like just absolutely decimate anything in its path. So good. Incense for the Damned is really good. We Love the Dead is really good. I love the guitar tones on this album. This is one of their longer ones. This is almost like 70 minutes long. So maybe for me, it's a little bit long for an album of this kind. But overall, I think it's really, really good. So I would recommend Time to Die to anybody who's looking to get into this band. And then number 5, I'm going to go with Witch Cult Today from 2007. The 6th album. again, lots of horror film references on this album, right from the get-go, right? Devil Rides Out, if you're a Hammer horror fan, man. I mean,
Oh yeah.
so it doesn't get much better than that, lyrically. So good. Title track is completely haunting, ethereal even, but still really heavy. I love Just's vocals on this song and on this album, really. He's a really good singer, I think. And he uses different tones from time to time, but he's got this kind of like real haunting, kind of like ghostly vocal style, which I think works really, really well with this band. Dunwich has this ridiculously bulldozing riff, which is just great. Satanic Rites of Dracula, just dripping with fuzz, and it's like, the riff is great. The guitar solo is bluesy and psychedelic. The Chosen Few is another good one. Torquemada 71 is another cool riff. Black Magic Rituals and Perversions is also really, really good. It's long, it's kind of ponderous, it's kind of sound like horror film soundtracky, and it's really creepy. I think one of their creepier songs. And then how about Saturnine?
Awesome. Fucking heavy as shit.
Oh my god, just so, I could rank this higher. I think this is excellent. Again, another album that if someone wanted to come into this band and check this one out first, even though it's somewhat of a later album, I wouldn't argue it at all, because I think this is just totally killer. And then my number 4 is I'm going to go with the debut. I mean, to me, this is, I agree with everything you said. It's a bit different. To me, this is their homage to Black Sabbath. This is their Black Sabbath album.
100%.
It's almost like they said, all right, we're going to do an album as our first album that's going to sound a little bit like Master of Reality, and maybe a little Pentagram, and that's what you get. So I think all the kind of harshness of the albums that come afterwards aren't really here yet. It's very basic, like Stone Magnet, beefy, bluesy, big riff. Morning Prayer, that's a really good one. Again, the riffing's kind of a little on the bluesy side, but bluesy like early Sabbath bluesy, right? Which really isn't all that bluesy, but Mountains of Mars, I think, is a hint of what's to come.
Yes, I agree.
Kind of like spacey and kind of psych, Behemoth is a great track. Devil's Bride just crushes. Black Butterfly, slow, doomy. I don't know. I think the riffs on this album are absolutely terrific. But as you said, this doesn't sound like your typical Electric Wizard album yet. I think they're still trying to figure out what their sound and style is. It's pretty close, but I think if you're someone who's maybe mildly familiar with this band, and maybe the harshness of some of the later albums to come is a little much for you, this might be more your liking, because it is just kind of standard, typical doom, right? This doesn't necessarily stand out from the pack all that much, but I think what it does really well.
I would concur. So top 3, I'll just do one at a time. We'll knock it down here. So my number 3 is Witch Cult Today from 2007. And this is my favorite of all the albums that they did when they changed their lineup. And I agree with everything you said. I'll make one slight adjustment, which is the 3rd song, which is my favorite song title they ever did. And actually one of the best song titles in all of Doom. It's Satanic Rites of Drugula.
Oh, did I say Drugula?
It's Drugula, which is fucking awesome. So I saw that, I'm like, that is appropriately fucking doom metal. But yeah, this to me, it's of all the stuff they've done since they shuffled their lineup up, and this one was again Liz Buckingham on bass, a Rob All-Issa on bass, Liz Buckingham on guitar, Rob All-Issa on bass, and a Sean Rudder on drums. So again, bass and drums, not as familiar with those guys, but yeah, they just, of everything they've done since reforming, this is to me is they just knocked it out of the park. The production is monolithic. It's a little of the albums, which I'm sure we'll be talking about in a second. The songs are some of the best they've done. It's got a little less like some of the later stuff. It does go more into like, not like Wizard Bloody Wizard, which is like almost got garage rock, but it goes a little more into like rock, and like it's a little mellower. This does not have that. This is a monolithically slow, heavy, crushing album. All the songs you mentioned as being good, I 100% concur with. And I love this artwork. That is just cool as shit. These guys always had cool artwork, and this is no exception. Yeah, nothing really on the inside there. But yeah, and this again, if you were to get into this, if you weren't looking for an album to get into these guys, there are kind of 2 obvious choices, which most people would recommend, and I kind of would too. But outside of that, this is my number 3. if you said, "Oh yeah, the first Electric Wizard album I heard was Witch Cult Today," highly respectable. And yeah, first time I heard this. So let's see, this was the second album they did with the new lineup. So the first one was We Live, and I, like I said, I liked it, but I wasn't really sold on it at first. I'm like, okay, I see what they're going for. This came out, and I immediately like, wow, all right, here we go. This is definitely what I want, and this is perfect. I loved it from the word go. Dunwich, obviously a reference to classic Lovecraft. Witch Cult Today, The Chosen Few, Black Magic, Rituals, and Perversions. That's an awesome title. Great album. Definitely a solid number 3 and one of their best albums. And by virtue of that, I think one of the best Doom albums I own, and I own a lot of Doom metal albums. So I rank this one very, very high. So that is my number 3, Witch Cult Today.
My number 3, Come My Fanatics, which I know a lot of people would rank number 1 and 2. It's pretty close for me. Again, much so, you can definitely tell where they go from this to this, right? This is the beginning of the actual Electric Wizard sound. Much harsher production, massive distortion, and you can totally see where they figured it out here, and the next album is to fully realize, okay, now we are who we want to be. Return Trip is slow, crushing, soaked in fuzz. Wizard in Black is a little bit faster paced, but still so heavy. I think the drums are bashing all over the place. The agonizing vocals, I think, work so well here. Doom Mantia is a very cool, trippy slice of kind of psychedelic doom. It's got bits of space rock and whatnot in here. I don't even know how you say it. Ivixor B, Phase Inductor. Yeah. Freaky song. Totally psychedelic. I mean, if you like psychedelic doom, this is the album for you.
Great album for it.
Son of Nothing is so raw and uncompromising. But there's that space rock thing going on here. It's very, very trippy in spots. And Solarian 13 just completely crushes, and it's got all this weird like Hawkwind synthesizer shit going on, bleeping and blipping all over the place. It's a really weird but really heavy and spacey album, and I know why people love this so much, because it's really, really cool and different. So,
well, my number 2 is Come My Fanatics from 1997. So right off the bat, this artwork, it's a photograph of Anton LaVey, who founded the Church of Satan, and some of his disciples. And then they took it and they obviously modified it to be like kind of like more like this old Hammer horror like movie poster. And they put all this trippy shit in the background. There's a planet hanging there. Yeah, as I think the way they made his eyes like kind of dark red, looking right at you, and he's like holding like a goblet there. That's one of the coolest fucking album covers in history. I love it. So my inside of mine is it's not that, but it's got this.
Oh yeah, you got this. Yeah,
just fucking cool as shit. And the back cover is the original 3 guys. Yeah, I concur with everything you said. This was not the first one I got, but I got it pretty early. It is spacey. It is fucked up. Like a lot of the stuff they did in the debut, when the songs are kind of concise. It's heavy, but the songs go in there. They're concise. They make their statement. They get to the point. You got some riffs. You got everything's pretty built and constructed. They went way off the deep end on the second album. There's a lot of like slow, drawn out, agonizing jams. Like you said, space rock, psych rock, Hawkwind. But the difference is this is a lot darker and more menacing. This is like you took some really bad acid and you got left alone in the dark forest and you're freaking the fuck out and you're just having a really bad time. And you're seeing shit and the sun's going down. It's like almost like a bad trip of an album. It's and every song on here, it's only got a couple songs, so the songs are longer and heavier and more drawn out. But yeah, it opens with Return Trip, Wizard in Black, Solarian 13. So the songs alternate between like this heavy, absolutely punishing. I'm not really a guitar player, but I know people who once you start getting into like, what did you record that on? What kind of gear? What rig did you use? These early Electric Wizard albums, especially within Doom, tend to come up a lot. I've seen in conversations. Because the guitar and bass tone is just absolutely, it's disgusting. But it serves the music well. It's not like just blown out, where everything's pegged to the red, where there's no identity or like, real form or shape to it. Like it's perfect for the music, but it is, when you talk about some distortion, And to me,
Fucking chainsaw, man. It's a chainsaw. It's like,
it is the when I started listening to these guys, and number one albums what triggered it, but this album also applies. It's like, to me, it was like, I want to invoke some comic book stuff here. It's like Doomsday from Marvel. So you take early Blue Cheer, you take Vincibus Eruptum, you take like Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, or actually Master of Reality. You take these early albums, and instead of the bands progressing and going in newer directions, you take those albums and you kill them, and they come back stronger and more of that. It's like, more Master Reality, like no advancements, like no progression to like Sabotage, more progressive song structures. It's just that heavy, nasty sound that Sabbath, Blue Cheer, and those guys are doing, just more of that. And you kill it again, and it comes back stronger, and you do it 1,000 times. And eventually you get the stuff that's basically that in form, like buried way underneath, but like this distortion and the heaviness is like, what the fuck? It's just like, if you crank this, which I have, this is definitely a window pane rattler. You hear, rattle, the cups start like a train's going by, like across your like kitchen countertop. It's like that. It's that early Sabbath Blue Cheer, but like repeated, so many times where it's like almost unrecognizable. But like, obviously, if you're a fan of this music, you'll hear that connection to that early stuff. But they're not, the first album, like, okay, it's their Black Sabbath album. This is like, what if Black Sabbath just was forced to record this album thousands of times, getting heavier and heavier each time, like on a planet with like where the gravity is like 1,000 times Earth, Then you end up with shit like this, which is this album where it's just like, what the, you put this on headphones, like good headphones, you just kind of space out. Oh my God, it's like perfect for that. It just drags out and goes, but not in a bad way. It's not like, it doesn't lose focus. If you're into this stuff, it's very, there's always like a destination in mind, even if that destination is someplace that you might not want to go. But like the songs always, they get to where they're going, and there's some coherency, even though it's not like a compact, like 3 or 4 minute song. It could be an 11-minute song, but the whole time you feel like you're going somewhere. So yeah, my number 2 is this awesome Come My Fanatics from 1997.
And that just happens to be Karen's number 1.
Yeah, we're totally respectable, and I could see why, because it's one of their psychiest and like most of those those qualities for the monolithic like heaviness and evil it's got. It does have a lot of that, and it marries them together like very effectively. It doesn't like give one favor over the other. It's awesome album.
Yeah, that is for sure their psychedelic and spacey doom album.
Absolutely.
And I think that, to me, that album is way more successful in doing that style than this album is.
Yes, I would concur with that as well.
I think they tried it a bit on that one, and it just didn't, kind of went off the rails a little bit. All right, so I got at number 2, I got We Live. I really love this album a lot. I think, here it's less harsh. They got the new lineup. It's less harsh than the other albums. But what I love about this album, you got 2 guitar players now. And to me, the riffs are even huger on this album. And it's just, so many great songs on here. I love Echo Echo Azarek. It's just, and all the songs are long on this, right? They got these big 10-minute, 8-minute, 10-minute long, gigantic sounding doom, punishing doom riffs all over the place. Flower of Evil is just so fuzzy. I love Just's vocals on this entire album as well. Another Perfect Day. Total belter, man. How heavy is some of this stuff? The Sun Has Turned Black. Like you said, monolithic. I actually have that written in my notes, because this so much of this is monolithic. Saturn's Children.
That word comes up a lot with these bits.
It's just, and nothing is short on this album. So if you like long songs of just absolutely nonstop, punishing heavy riffs, this one is for you. I really like this. I almost put this at number 1, Ryan, almost, but it can't be number 1, right?
So when we started doing this list, like I could see number 1 coming from like 8,000 miles away. And this is one of those bands too where I don't know, like you could, like Karen picked Come My Fanatics, which is my number 2, totally respectable. But to me, so I was, this came out in 2000. So I was just getting into this stuff. I think I got it. I didn't get it when it came out, but I probably got it around 2001. And I remember getting this album, and a Relapse Records released, a little quick aside, Relapse Records released a collection of early Pentagram stuff called First Days Here, which is my favorite Pentagram stuff. And it's kind of where I started with Pentagram. So I remember I ended up getting them, not the same day, but within like maybe a week of each other. And that like, that was my first introduction to Pentagram, just hearing that stuff. And so that those two releases in conjunction, like set me on a doom path, along with some of this other early Southern Lord stuff. But yeah, this album I heard, and I think I had to sit down when I heard it. I bought it. Someone recommended it to me, but I didn't hear any of the songs first. You know, I'm like, well, I like Black Sabbath. You know, I like heavier, slower stuff. Even though it was kind of new to me, it wasn't really in vogue at the time, although it was getting there. And this album is a big reason why. But that is now I originally bought the CD, but I had to get the vinyl. This is their 2000 album, Dope Throne. To me, I could accept, and I've often felt. Now, when you say best doom of all time, I tend to take Black Sabbath out of it because they're kind of their own, like they pretty much invented heavy metal. So I don't really include them in the conversation because doom is like a little what came later, even though obviously it's very Black Sabbath influenced. But that said, I have felt and I've heard it said, and I would agree with that. This could be the greatest doom metal album of all time. And there are days when I put it on and I feel that way. It is fucking heavy. When it comes to the production on this album, this is one of those things where, again, like I said, I'm not like a guitar guy with the gear and stuff they use, but as soon as it opens with Vinium Sabathi, which is a short song, it's only like 3 minutes, very to the point. It's almost like they're Paranoid. The song Paranoid gets in, makes its point, get out, but the production is just it's disgusting. I'm like, how the fuck did they record that? And you'd almost expect it to like kind of lapse into total feedback, total noise. All the needles get pegged in the red. It just gets blown out. The speaker cones get fried. The amp set on fire. The studio burns down. Earthquakes open up. Swallows the building. But it doesn't. It tracks through all these songs. The second song, Funeralopolis, is probably my favorite Electric Wizard song ever. Opens with like this bluesy kind of like light guitar, like boom, just like it's deceptive. Like, where are we going? And then all of a sudden the guitar kicks in and it's like the Jolly Green Giant ran in the room and hit you with a sledgehammer. It's fucking, Jesus fucking Christ. It's so heavy. Weird Tales, which obviously is an homage to the magazine. Like I said, where Lovecraft really got his start. You have samples from, I think, Witchfinder General in here, samples from all these different old movies. The Hills Have Eyes, come on, that's cool. I Witchfinder, awesome. It ends with the song Dope Throne, which is like one of the heaviest songs in the existence of recorded music. And then if you wait, I don't know if it's on the vinyl version, I don't think it is, but on the CD version, if you wait like 10 minutes after the song ends, you have this whole interview with Barbara Walters, like back in the 80s during the Satanic Panic, where she's like, talking about how listen to this satanic heavy music, Motley Crue, all these bands, corrupt minds, kids go out, form suicide cults, kill each other, burn down villages, Children of the Corn, kind of shit. Yeah, this album is just it's monolithic beyond words. The cover is cool as shit. There's Satan hitting the bong. You got the buildings in the background, which look real fucking freaky. Maybe they're up in Arkham, Massachusetts, out in some woods. The Dunwich Horror, very Lovecraftian. The inside cover too. You got pentagrams in there. You got blue jeans in there. With a pentagram on her pants there. Yeah, this album is well, first off, if you're going to get into Electric Wizard, this obviously is the one I'd recommend because I think it's the best. I think it's maybe the best doom album ever. The guitar, just for the guitar and bass alone, it's just so disgusting. But like you said too, it's not sloppy playing. It serves a purpose. This actually is one of their most song-oriented albums. Like Come My Fanatics, Let Us Pray. Some of these other albums tend to get a little, I don't want to say lost in the sauce, but they get in these very long, drawn-out, like psyche kind of like feedback sections.
Very little of that here at all.
Yeah, these songs are long. They're definitely like Weird Tales is like a multi-part song.
Yeah, Weird Tales is probably the only track on here that goes down that route. But look at like Barbarian, which is fast-paced and just compact, and
even like Funeralopolis is almost 10 minutes, but it's very like memorable. The chorus is memorable. The lyrics are and this is another album where the lyrics are just bleak. Just the Funeralopolis talking about the whole planet Earth being a tomb, nuke the whole planet, fuck it all, let's end it tonight. It's very bleak and dark, and it took me a couple listens to get to the lyrics when I first heard it because I'm just like I could not get around how heavy this was. Like and this is coming from someone that loved Black Sabbath, and that old stuff's heavy, but I heard this, it's just. It's like this evil chainsaw that's been like tuned to like drop Z tuning. It's fucking crazy. And what's kind of funny, and friends have noted this, and I've said it too, is I don't smoke weed at all, but I love Dope Throne, and I also love Dope Smoker by Sleep, which is another great album too. Also came out, also around the same time, just as iconic for different reasons, but similar reasons. So yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, this album is fucking immense. It is good. So that is my number one. As soon as we started doing this, I'm like, well, Dope Throne's obviously number one. There's like Come My Fanatics is good, and I love it. One of the best Doom albums ever. But to me, nothing could top this. And this is also the first album I heard from them too, and the impression it left on me when I first got into it.
Huge.
And then that really contributed a lot to me. Like, well, what else is there in this modern world of Doom? You know, modern at the time, but what else is there? So I started digging into like Southern Lord. I started digging into this stuff, and I heard tons of bands, and this is also kind of what led me down the path to when I listen to like a lot of Doom now. I like the stuff that's just bleak, nihilistic, just heavy stuff, and a little less on the stoner kind of psych side. Although I do like that stuff, but like this kind of like set the tone for me in a lot of ways. But to me, no album's done it better than this one. So number one is Dope Throne.
Yeah, it set the bar really high, right? That's also the first album I ever heard from them as well, and it's kind of tough to top. I agree with everything you said. I don't think I can add anything else. The only thing I'll say is like they must have, at the time, they must have gone out there and bought like the most gnarly sounding distortion pedal they could find, and had some rocket scientist tweak the transistors in there to turn the gain up another 5 notches, because it's just like you've never heard anything like that before. You've never heard distortion like this before anywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of, because even like listening to like Vincebus Eruptum and like a lot of these old albums, which are admittedly very heavy and like distortions like blown out. Even the heaviest shit I ever heard up to that point, I don't consider on equal to this. Like the distortion, the gain it's like in another universe. Yeah. And they never really did it again either. Like the stuff since has been heavy and disgusting.
No,
but that album like stands alone, like just from like a recording standpoint. It's out of this world how fucking heavy and how just like, whoa, how nasty it is, you know.
They have other harsh guitar sounding, like from a guitar tone perspective, they have other harsh sounding albums, but nothing is on the level of this one at all. It doesn't come close.
It is insane. Yeah. I can imagine in the years since folks starting to form Doom bands, you know, like, all right, let's play some Doom metal. And there's probably been a lot of conversations like, well, what the hell gear did they use? Like, how did they record this? And since I've never heard anything that sounds like it, I'm guessing that no one really, even if they bought the same equipment, like you said, they got some like mad scientists fiddling with the stuff, because I've never heard anybody replicate it. And I've heard some heavy shit since, but there's something about that it's never been duplicated at all. So they got that magic formula just once on that album.
That's crazy. So everybody watching, rank these as you like them. If you're new to the band, I think you have lots of starting points to go dive into the catalog. You know, Ryan mentioned EP before. They've got EPs and splits. There's all sorts of stuff you can get on them. If you're really interested in hearing the early stuff, the demo-y stuff, go check out Pre-Electric Wizard 1989 and 1984. This is available on Rise Above Records. Very easy to get.
Also
and,
cool.
Here you can kind of hear the band kind of early stages, different lineups and things, but it's also really cool to add to the collection if you
know,
so
I did forget to mention one thing, and I should have mentioned it when we talked about Let Us Pray. But after Mark Greening and Tim Bagshaw left Electric Wizard, they temporarily formed a band called Ramses, like the Pharaoh Ramses.
Yeah.
This is a collection of their earlier stuff in their first album called Misanthropic Alchemy. Again, this is not like Electric Wizard, but it's similar in some ways. It's very heavy. It's very disgusting. It's got a little more of a black metal flavor, but not really. But if you like any of this stuff, and especially if you like that early 2000s, late 90s Electric Wizard, these guys are cool. Yeah, Ramses. This was on Ritual Productions. I don't know if it's hard to get now. I bought this when it came out, but yeah, just another cool band that's like kind of like peripheral to Electric Wizard, which is really just worth checking out if you want more of the same. Because these guys were, to me, obviously Just Osborne was a big part of it, but the other guys were a big part of the drumming on the Come My Fanatics, and especially Dope Throne, the bass playing, the bass tone. It's huge. It's a big part of the album. So these guys, when I was real curious to see what they did next. And yeah, I like that a lot. So definitely something else to keep in mind.
Cool. So there you have it, everybody. Ranking the albums of the Electric Wizard. Like I said, rank them as you like them down in the comments below. And if you haven't listened to them, go check them out, come back, report down in the comments what you think. And we'll see you 1 week from today for another episode of Ranking the Albums. This is on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together, all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. For Ryan Skow, and see him on the next episode of the Hudson Valley Squares, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you Tuesday on In the Prog Seat. Take care.